Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling defeated, not because you were wrong, but because something deeper had been taken from you? You spoke your truth. You said what needed to be said. But instead of clarity, you were left with confusion. Instead of strength, you were left feeling small. That feeling, that gnawing dissonance, is no coincidence. It is a signal, a subtle but powerful indicator that the world has sold you a lie. A lie that says speaking is power, that to be silent is to be weak, that to win, you must explain, defend, and persuade. But what if I told you this is not power? What if I told you that true power has nothing to do with how loud you are and everything to do with how still you can be? In our modern age of noise, social media, round-the-clock opinions, debates disguised as dialogue, we are constantly pushed to speak, to respond, to prove our worth through sound. But sound can be a smokescreen, and speech often is noise dressed as meaning. Friedrich Nietzsche saw through the veil long before the rest of us. He recognized that those who speak most are often the ones who understand least, that those who rush to argue are the ones most desperate to be seen. He wrote not for the masses, but for those willing to stand alone in their thinking, those willing to endure the burden of deep truth. He believed radically that the need to speak is a sign of inner deficiency. A man who knows who he is does not explain himself. A woman rooted in her worth does not beg to be heard. Their silence is not emptiness, it is certainty. When you need to win the argument, you have already lost something more vital, your center. And when you speak simply to be validated, you hand your power to the one you're trying to impress. Imagine this: two people arguing, one emotional and verbose, trying to convince the other, voice rising with urgency, the other calm and still, listening with eyes that do not flinch. Who truly holds the power? True strength does not roar, it does not plead, it simply stands. And in that stillness, there is a force stronger than any shouted word. The illusion we've inherited is that victory lies in expression. But what if the opposite is true? What if the most dangerous man in the room is the one who says nothing at all? This is not a call for cowardice. It is not a retreat from life. It is a redefinition of courage. Because silence, when chosen consciously, is not passive. It is piercing. It is deliberate, it is surgical. To speak is easy. To stay silent in the face of provocation, that requires mastery. Part 2. Silence as strategy. Silence, when wielded with intent, is not merely the absence of sound, it is a calculated presence. It is an active engagement with the world through restraint, through clarity, through composure. In its purest form, silence is the posture of the sovereign. Let's look at this from the lens of psychology. Studies show that in confrontational scenarios, silence is often interpreted not as uncertainty, but as dominance. When someone refuses to respond, the human brain, conditioned to expect social cues, begins to panic. It fills the silence with assumptions, projections, and fears. This is the power of controlled silence. Not random, not fearful, but focused. It is the same silence found in great chess players before a move, in seasoned generals before a war cry, in stoic leaders before they act. What most people fear about silence is not the quiet itself, it is what the quiet reveals. When you don't speak, the other person is forced to sit with their own words. They can no longer rely on your reaction to validate or counter their statements. They face their own thoughts, unfiltered and unshielded. This is why manipulators thrive on reaction. They poke, they provoke, they push you to respond, because your response gives them fuel. It gives them a map of your emotional landscape. But when you remain silent, the manipulator is left disarmed. They cannot read you, they cannot control you, and without your emotional reaction, they must confront their own instability. In social psychology, this is known as the mirror effect. Your silence acts as a mirror, reflecting the other person's internal world. If they are insecure, they will feel judged. If they are unstable, they will feel threatened. If they are deceitful, they will feel exposed. And all of this, without you saying a single word. To master silence is to understand the game behind the conversation. The surface dialogue is rarely the real issue. The real battle is for emotional control, for mental real estate, for narrative power. The one who does not react controls the tempo. The one who does not respond defines the field. And this is where silence becomes strategy, not retreat, not weakness, but dominance by stillness. Part 3. The Übermensch within Nietzsche envisioned a higher kind of human. Not bound by the morality of the crowd, not reactive to the norms and judgments of society, but sovereign, self-defining, awake. He called this being the Übermensch, the Overman, a person who has transcended the need for external approval, who no longer plays the game of power because he is power. The Übermensch does not engage in petty disputes. He does not seek validation from the herd. He walks through the world with a presence so firm, so unshaken, that his silence alone commands attention. This kind of person knows that words are often wasted, that most arguments are not about truth, but about ego. And so he speaks only when necessary, and when he does, his words land like thunder. Imagine this, a crowded hall filled with voices arguing, and in the center, one man, silent, not out of fear, but out of knowing. His gaze steady, his breath calm, his stillness unnerving. Others glance his way, unsure of what he's thinking. Their minds begin to spin. What does he know that we don't? Why isn't he reacting? Is he judging us? Is he planning something? And in their speculation, in their noise, they reveal their own chaos. Meanwhile, he remains still. This is the posture of the Übermensch, not reactive, not defensive, but powerful in presence. His silence is not submission, it is sovereignty. In the modern world, silence is misunderstood. It is mocked, seen as disengagement. But for the Übermensch, silence is precision. It is selective engagement. It is power distilled to its most potent form. If you want to become this kind of person, you must unlearn everything society has taught you about voice and value. You must unlearn the need to be liked, the impulse to correct, the desire to be understood, and in its place, build something stronger. Build the capacity to sit in your truth without audience, to hold your vision without applause, to live your philosophy, not perform it. This is the essence of silent power. Part 4, from submission to sovereignty. But not all silence is strength. There exists another kind of silence, quieter but far more dangerous. The silence of surrender, of self-erasure, of letting the world write your story while you nod in approval. This is the silence of the unspoken yes. The silence that lets others speak for you, decide for you, define you. It wears the mask of politeness, but it is born of fear. Many of us were taught this silence from childhood. Be good. Don't argue. Respect your elders. But when that conditioning becomes chronic compliance, we shrink, not just in voice, but in spirit. Nietzsche called this slave morality, a moral code created by the weak to survive in a world dominated by the strong. It teaches you that your silence is virtuous, even as your soul screams for space. And so we become ghosts, present but not powerful, alive but not awake. But here is the brutal truth. The world does not reward the silent sufferer. It exploits them. The colleague who takes credit for your ideas, the partner who steamrolls your needs, the friend who expects your silence as loyalty. Every time you swallow your voice to keep the peace, you abandon yourself. You trade temporary comfort for long-term resentment. But there is a path out. It begins the moment you realize that silence is not always neutral. It can be complicity. And if you want to reclaim your power, you must learn to transform that silence, not into noise, but into presence. From now on, your silence must not be submission. It must be signal, a boundary, a warning, a declaration. You are no longer the one who needs to speak to be seen. You are the one who is seen, even when you do not speak. You are no longer the one who explains. You are the one who embodies. This is not easy. It requires courage, discipline, solitude. But what you gain in return is priceless. Self-sovereignty, the power to shape your own narrative, to choose when to speak and when to remain still, to live not for approval, but for alignment. In a world of noise, the one who masters silence becomes unshakable. And that is real power.